What's up, guys? I have a little bit of a different video today. Normally, I try to focus more on, going over a variety of different things, and I don't always focus on just gameplay alone, but given the fact that we have early access to an Xbox Series X, a preview version of it, I thought it'd be really cool to give you guys a full look at what games look like while they're running on the system. So unlike some of our regular videos, this is a 4K 60 frames HDR video that's pretty much after this point going to be nothing but gameplay non-stop, so you guys can really see what these backwards compatible games look like on the Series X. So I already touched a little bit on Control during our initial backwards compatibility impressions, but this is really a game that I wanted to try out on the Series X immediately, because while it looked good on the Xbox One X, it had its problems. There were frame drops, massive loading times. It just wasn't exactly the best example of a smooth playing game. And on the Series X, basically all those issues disappear. No matter how many enemies I'm fighting, how much debris is flying everywhere, the game is maintaining a super buttery smooth frame rate, and it looks great. Now, like with Control, Destiny 2 is another title that really benefits from having a much more stable frame rate thanks to the improved performance of the Series X. And something that I think is very interesting to note about this one in particular is that the current version we're still able to play is capped at 30 FPS because that is what the Xbox One version is locked at. But Bungie has already gone out of their way to say that for the Series X, as well as for the PS5, Destiny 2 will be getting patches to support up to 60 frames. So this is one of those titles where you're seeing some smoother performance for now, but there's already promises of being something even more in the near future. Monster Hunter World is probably one of the best examples of the change in performance on the Series X, because normally the game offers 3 different performance modes to choose from, one of which is prioritizing resolution. Now on the Xbox One X, prioritizing resolution would result in a almost 4K resolution, with frame rates running roughly around 30, sometimes going up as high as 40, whereas on the Series X, while maintaining that same resolution, the game is running at basically a smooth 60 the entire time. Taking a break from Xbox One games, let's look at something that's much older with Panzer Dragoon Orta from the original Xbox. Now, the thing about this game is that while of course it runs smoothly on the Series X, considering how much more powerful it is than an original Xbox, a unique feature it's now making use of, like Tekken 7, is Auto HDR. This is a game that was released in 2002, well before HDR was even a thing in gaming, and now it's able to make use of that thanks to the Series X. Panzer Dragoon Orta is not the only original Xbox game that is backwards compatible and can see benefits from Auto HDR. Fusion Frenzy is another excellent example thanks to its reliance on multiple poppy colors for each playable character and the zaniness happening in every single minigame. This is a title that once again is hitting a new variety of color depth that was previously not possible in its original release because, again, HDR didn't exist yet. Like in our original impressions video, Final Fantasy XV is one of the games that really benefits from the Series X, particularly because of its light performance mode. This is the only mode that uncaps the frame rate from 30 frames per second, and on the Xbox One X, the game still ran at a sub 60 frame rate, whereas on the Series X, we are seeing super smooth gameplay at 60 frames, which was not possible with the older systems. Like with Control at the top end of this video, Sekiro is one of those games that came out in the later part of the Xbox One X's lifecycle and really showed that it was pushing what the system was capable of, with some really bad frame drops happening during more hectic times in gameplay, which much smoother gameplay with a lot of stuff happening on screen, that is a massive improvement over its One X counterpart. Now, Fallout New Vegas is a slightly different example I wanted to use in this video because of all the backwards compatible titles that I have messed with and tried out, this is one of the few that did not work with Auto HDR. Now, this is something that Microsoft has already talked about for this feature. There are some games where they tried using it internally, and it just didn't work out for that particular game for whatever reason. And in the case of Fallout New Vegas, it probably has something to do with the fact that the game is just various different shades of brown, yellow, and olive green. The point is that there are some titles where at the end of the day, Auto HDR is just not going to be a great choice, and so it's automatically disabled rather than something that you can choose to use. Now, a lot of the games that we've been talking about and focusing on so far have really benefited when it comes to frames per second, but Crackdown 3 is an example of something that benefits on the resolution side of things. This is one of those titles in the Xbox One X that leverages dynamic resolution scaling, which means that it favors keeping a constant frame rate and will drop the resolution of the game during really hectic times in order to ensure that frame rate stays stable. Like with Crackdown 3 earlier, Assassin's Creed Odyssey is another title that makes use of dynamic resolution scaling, but in its case could drop to a much lower resolution if enough insanity was happening on screen. With the Series X, again, we are making sure that thanks to the much increased higher power, the system is maintaining a higher resolution much more consistently, rather than dropping down if things get a little too heavy. Okay, now I know when you came here looking to see different games being played on the Xbox Series X, Hydro Thunder from the 360 was probably not at the top of your list of ones you wanted to see, but I think this is an interesting one to compare, mainly because of A, it's a very colorful game, and for its time, it was aiming for at least a somewhat realistic visual style, and so this is a really nice showcase of what Auto HDR does. Now, to begin with, Doom Eternal is already a beautifully optimized game that looks great on the Xbox One X, but with Xbox Series X, again, we're running into that situation of making use of dynamic resolution scaling, so it's going to maintain a higher resolution much longer while still having that very, very smooth-looking gameplay. Now, of all the Gears of War games, I really want to check out Gears of War 3 because of the original trilogy on the 360, this is the one that actually features more than 3 colors. And by being a 360 game, this is again another example of a game that is able to now make use of HDR, which did not exist when it originally came out. So we're seeing greater color depth, which is especially showing up in this title whenever you see lambents exploding, or looking at the colors in the sky. Now, getting back to some more backwards compatibility tests, Banjo-Kazooie is an example of another game that is from the 360 that is getting the benefit of Auto HDR. However, I think something worth noting is that compared to some of the other backwards compatible games that we tested, it was not getting the same kind of color depth and variety that we were seeing hitting some other titles. It's still an improvement over what it would normally do in standard, but it's just not quite as drastic of a change compared to some of these other Auto HDR titles. Similar to the case with Control, Quantum Break was another game that was definitely pushing what the systems at the time were capable of doing. This was, of course, a pre-Xbox One X launch, so the game did end up running a lot smoother with that release, and on the Series X, we were again seeing much more stable frame rates. Now, I want to take a look at some backwards compatible Halo titles, and what better way than to look at the 360 version of Halo Combat Evolved. Considering the age of this game, it looks really great on the Xbox Series X. Again, we are seeing super fast load times and the addition of Auto HDR. This is just another title that shows how older games can definitely benefit from the new Series X features. Now, the Red Dead Redemption 2, again, this is one of those titles where we're talking about the use of dynamic resolution scaling, but the big deal with this one is that the upper limit for the Xbox One X version was actual native 4K, so in the case of running it on a Series X, we're seeing that 4K resolution just staying a lot more constant, never really dropping despite what's happening on screen. Now, one of my favorite games from the Xbox One that sadly got a little abandoned is Sunset Overdrive. It never got any kind of proper Xbox One X upgrades, including the fact the game never supported HDR, despite the fact that it is one of the most colorful games exclusive to the system. So, thanks to the Xbox Series X's Auto HDR, that is finally a feature that can come to the game, and it just makes it look even more colorful than before. Speaking of insanely colorful, let's go ahead and cover the same kind of topic but for the Xbox 360 with one of my favorite classic arcade titles, Geometry Wars. And then we have Rise of the Tomb Raider. This is another title that offers a couple different performance modes to choose from. In particular, we want to try this game out in its native 4K mode because on the Xbox One X, while it would hit 4K, we did see the frame rate suffer as a result, but now on the Series X, that frame rate is nice and stable while maintaining that native 4K resolution.